Hello and welcome to the Doyen Interviews with me, Bridget Nathan. This is an Australian art and design podcast that speaks with inspiring women. Thanks to Anon for the beautiful introductory music and also to Grace Yeo for illustrating the episodes. I'm glad you've tuned in. Also, thanks to Coolon LED Lighting for sponsoring this season. Coolon have an awesome architectural range, so head on over to their website to see what they offer. The Doyen Interviews acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we're recording. We recognise and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging.
Okay, so hello and welcome to our next guest, Nayan Puri. Nayan is a registered architect in Victoria, and she also has a really amazing background in the earth. So things like permaculture and natural building have been a really big part of her experience. Thank you, Nayan, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Bridget.
How are you?
I'm good.
Are you working from home full time at the moment?
Yes, I was pretty lucky because I started working from home at the start of this year, so it wasn't too much of a change. Yeah. But the cool thing now is that everyone else is working from home, so I feel less isolated.
Oh, that's really good. And so thinking about adaptation, what does adaptation mean to you as a sort of general concept?
Yeah, I guess adaptation to me really is about resilience. So the way that I picture it in my mind is me falling down in the dirt, brushing my knees, looking at my wounds, sort of letting them heal, and then getting back up and getting going again. So it's really that brushing the knees off and getting back up. That's how I sort of visualize resilience in my mind. Yeah.
Do you feel that when people brush themselves off, they've changed a little bit, or with that you always?
Yeah, I guess I guess the process is brushing off the dirt, learning from your experience, addressing the wounds, letting the wounds heal, and then getting back up. Yeah. But I always think about that every time I fall flat on my face for one reason or another. I think like, okay, now's the time to brush off your knees and get back up. Like the most important thing is getting back up.
Yeah. I guess in that sense, adaptation and resilience are pretty closely related words.
Yeah.
And so, it would be great to talk a little bit about your career, and you've paved out a pretty interesting focus for yourself in terms of natural building and ESD. Where did this all begin?
Yeah, that's a good question. It all really began for me after leaving uni. So after, I guess, I got off the conveyor belt of school, university, and I did 6 years for my architectural degree. I think a lot of things had happened over the years, and then when I finished my degree, there was a whole bunch of life events and circumstances that all culminated. I just hit a wall. That actually was it was actually almost like a breakthrough. And so before that moment in time where I had this breakthrough, I was just going along. I would say that I was very much on this sort of conveyor belt that I sort of really get a job, buy a house, get married, or maybe get married, then buy a house and all of those sorts of things. But when I had this breakthrough, I just completely changed my whole view of the world. And I think I went from not just thinking about myself, but thinking about myself in the web of life and that we're all sort of part of this wider system. And that's really when I started to like have a strong affinity with nature. So so my passion sort of came to me in one moment when I was 24, pretty much.
Wow. That's amazing. And so insightful and great that you can share that. When you think about nature, what does nature mean to you? Like, there are a lot of themes that come with that and that have, I think, we're obviously friends, so this interview is a little bit different in that I know a bit about your background. But what is does nature mean to you in relation to the built environment, and thinking about your experiences with how that's played out into permaculture and natural building. How do you see the natural environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I went for a walk this morning and it was raining, and I'm very lucky to be living near like a very treed area. And as I was standing in the rain in the forest, I was just thinking that this is where I feel the most myself. This is where I feel the most truly me and who I am. So then it's sort of like I feel then I go into my everyday life and my architecture, and I feel like it's almost catch up. Like, how can what I do emanate that feeling that I feel in nature?
Do you sometimes feel that these like two mindsets are at odds with each other?
Yeah, very much so. Sort of this, I mean, with architecture and building, we're cutting down trees to make houses, and often houses that don't look anywhere near as lovely or feel as good as being in the forest where the tree was originally. So I've had a really hard time feeling that affinity with nature when I had that breakthrough, and then reconciling the fact that what I do as a profession is sometimes destroy environments to make what we think is a better version of a space. But having said that, I think if you use the materials in a respectful and beautiful way, like use those trees, and make sure you're somehow regenerating the earth, that we can like almost, this sounds really lame, but co-create with nature and create really beautiful environments.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think as well you've had some pretty amazing hands-on experiences where you've probably been able to remove yourself from the Melbourne scene. We're so privileged that we can sometimes leave where we are and go somewhere else and experience it there. How did you find experimenting with natural buildings?
Yeah. So after I had the breakthrough, let's just call it breakthrough, I then discovered permaculture. So permaculture is as a ecological design framework.
Okay.
It's about working with nature to create sort of, I think permaculture derives from permanent agriculture, but it's about working with nature rather than against nature. So a lot of people know permaculture more from a gardening point of view, where you put plants together that have a symbiotic relationship and they all work together. So, but permaculture actually looks at all aspects of life, from money to living arrangements to community to relationships, and questions how can you make all of those systems symbiotic and more closed loop, so everything's working not in harmony but working together and they all interrelate.
So when you were studying it and working with it, it wasn't just buildings that you were experimenting with. Was it, like sort of social frameworks?
Yes, social frameworks, economic frameworks, even permaculture even looks at like city planning and this idea of decentralizing everything and making just, I guess, bringing everything down to human scale and community scale. There's a lot of sort of, I don't know what the word is, but there's a lot of like callbacks to tribal living and looking at the way in which we have lived as humans and bringing that into now, how do we put that into like a modern version of society? So permaculture is also like strong in eco villages and things like that. So then that's when I guess a lot of hippies got into permaculture for those sorts of reasons. But actually at its root, it's a very pragmatic and very well thought out idea and systems of ideas. It started from a thesis written by David Holmgren and Bill Mollison, who was his supervisor. And so I think that I think it was David Holmgren or Bill Mollison who said like the hippies have actually like put permaculture, like it sort of hindered its progress as like a mainstream uptake, but it's a very amazing framework. Yeah. So the way that I came across it was I went to in 2011, I went to this amazing music festival called Eclipse, which was for the full eclipse of the sun. And I was at that point looking for like, how can I practice architecture in this new paradigm of thinking where I feel like more of affinity of nature, and what do I do? And I was thinking like, just in terms of materials and architecture. And I started talking to this architect there who designed this bamboo structure. And he told me, don't just focus on architecture, look at permaculture. And that's like the first time I heard the word.
Oh.
And then following that, I came back to Melbourne because I was in Cairns. And then I just signed up for a permaculture design certificate with series. And then that's, I guess, when my journey began in sustainability. That's then the natural building is sort of something that permaculture really pushes. So really advocates for, and that's just using materials around your site, using natural materials, low embodied energy materials, and then also building things yourself.
What are some examples of buildings that you've done or projects that you've done that have used those techniques?
Yeah. So I went in 2013, I decided that I'd quit my architecture job and go in search of like the most sustainable way of building. It was like the most idealistic thing you could do. So I signed up for a natural building course in Thailand, and then had plans and then I went to India and worked with bamboo. So it was a year of pretty much just my hands in the mud, where I worked with mud brick building, bamboo construction, earth bags, cob, which is like straw and mud all put together. And so I spent a year pretty much experimenting with all those different types of building methods.
Wow. And how was it? Was there a bit of a community who were building these things together?
Yeah, I think that was probably the most enjoyable thing. The sense of community you have when you're building with a crew who are all interested in the same thing, or that there's something so special about building buildings with other people in a community. Yeah. So the actual act of building was fun, sometimes quite tedious and hard and repetitive. But when you had friends and you were singing and dancing while building, it was pretty amazing.
Were there any challenges that happened, or any like funny moments that you look back on your time there?
I guess it was just like being with a lot of hippies. I think for me the biggest challenge was like I found this amazing thing, yet it's so like it's like diametrically opposed to what I practice in architecture in Melbourne. So it's just how can I found something I love this much, but how can I practice architecture with this? Like, it's not like I'm going to rock up to site with the builders and say, hey, let's take off our shoes and like build this building together, you know? Like, it's just not done.
Yeah. So you went there, and then what happened after that? Did you come back to Australia after that experience, or did you do a bit more traveling and working overseas?
Yeah, I came back to Australia and then traveled to a few places in Australia, and then I really I pretty much ran out of money, so I had to find a reasonable job. And then that's when my friend Hannah Robertson connected me with Paul Ha, who was working on a project called Mullum Creek. And then that's when my next journey began, with Paul and Mullum Creek,
I've got so many questions about Mullum Creek because you've spoken about it, but I'm not 100% sure the scope of work. So what is Mullum Creek?
Yeah, Mullum Creek is a housing development in Don Vale. So it was the the land belonged to the Matthews family, who are 3 siblings who grew up there. And it's 50 acres, and they wanted to do an ethical and environmental housing development. So they carved the land up, and then they proceed to sell the land. And anyone who buys land at Mullum Creek has to meet these quite strong ESD, environmentally sustainable design guidelines. But they also have done, before even like the subdivision happened, they've given half of the land back to the natural reserve and done a lot of regenerative work on the project. Yeah. So my role was with Paul Ha, who's the most epic architect I've ever met. He's just my absolute hero. He is like a encyclopedia for sustainable knowledge and environmental knowledge. He's amazing. So he was hired by the Matthews family to review all their houses and landscape and make sure that they met the Mullum Creek guidelines. So Paul then hired me to help him with that, and then he proceeded to educate me in everything to do with sustainability, pretty much.
How many houses were being built there?
Yeah, there's 56 houses, I believe at this point in time in 2020, like half of them have been built. So the one stage is complete nearly, and then the second stage is starting. So our role was really about review and support. The Matthews family is an initiative, brought in a whole bunch of sustainable architects to help the people who bought the lots develop sort of sustainable designs that can meet the guidelines. So what we were doing was really looking, one of our big jobs was helping architects and clients meet thermal performance. So the houses had to be 7.5 Energy Star rated. So really helping them make sure that the planning was right, that the windows were correct orientation and shading, and that they could achieve 7.5 stars. And then other big aspects were like materials. So making sure that all the timbers in the buildings were sustainably sourced, and Paul had done a lot of research and put together an amazing timbers guideline, where you can access it on the internet. Just type in Mullum Creek Timbers Guide, and it's a list of sustainably sourced timbers. And then there was other things like each house had to have 4 kilowatt solar power and 20,000 litres water tanks. So we was reviewing the designs and making sure that they were meeting them, and when they didn't, we would provide advice. And part of the role that me, Paul, and also Rafi and Jess, who are also part of the team, part of our big role was writing guidelines. So pretty awesome guidelines on things like underslab insulation, timber products, identifying when Baltic pine has been used on site, and making sure that doesn't happen because of the source of this Baltic pine is pretty environmentally not great. So things like that.
Yeah. It sounds like you're taking 2 approaches. Like one is that you're trying to implement the materials that are good and that you've researched, but then you're also trying to cut out the materials that aren't good.
Yeah. Very much so.
Were there many challenges?
It was really good. I learnt so much, and I guess we were ESD consultants. Probably the best thing that's come out of it is the team, the team that we were. So it was me, Paul, Rafi, and Jess, and we have since all moved on from Mullum Creek, but we're now collaborating, and we've got a bunch of projects in the pipeline, a sort of ode to the work that we did at Mullum Creek, creating guidelines. We're planning to start an ESD website where people can find this information, and then we can generate more information to support the industry and really identify where the holes are in knowledge and information, and then help to produce those. So I really found my tribe. It was that was one thing that came amazing that came out of Mullum Creek. But also, it's like I attended the University of Paul Haar and learnt everything there is to know about things like thermal performance, timbers, concrete, embodied energy, life cycle analysis. So it was going from the natural building, which is all about grassroots, very practical hands-on experience, then moving to Mullum Creek, which is all technical, really a lot of technical experience. After about 2-3 years working at Mullum Creek, I feel like I had quite a sound knowledge in sustainable building design. But a lot of Mullum Creek was report writing, and I really missed the design side of architecture.
And so how has this led into your career at the moment?
Yeah, well, actually, when I was at Mullum Creek, I actually started teaching at Melbourne Uni, and I absolutely loved it. I love teaching. So now it's probably been about 5 years. So I've been teaching in a whole bunch of subjects at uni, from sustainable design to first year construction, and ESD subject. So that was one of the best things for me that came out of just learning, like having all this technical knowledge that I can now share that with students.
Amazing.
And and then and then there's been a long process of getting back into architecture and designing buildings and working out what I can do in architecture practice and what my path is in terms of that, how I can design buildings that are good for the environment. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like now, like thinking back on all that stuff, what do you think are some of the issues that the built environment is like causing or that we're struggling with at the moment, during the design process or the construction process?
That's so good. I think it actually has a lot to do with size. I just think we build so much, so in such big ways, that one thing that we really need to look at is just the size of buildings, especially houses. Like Australia has some of the largest houses on average in the world, and we just have rooms upon rooms upon rooms that are just not required. So I think, that's one big issue that we sort of need to address. And then, I think my passion is really improving biodiversity and making sure that we're not destroying the earth and through deforestation and these sorts of things. So I definitely am very interested in how to improve biodiversity or minimize the amount of materials we're using.
I really liked the idea that you were telling me about to do with biodiversity, which is planting more trees. What is that concept? Is that something that you're working on at the moment?
Yeah. I think when coronavirus sort of hit and we went into lockdown, I called Paul, who's like my mentor, Paul Ha, and just like, what are we going to do, Paul? Like, this is not great. And what's the history? I mean, sorry, what's going to be the sort of trajectory for architecture? What am I going to do? Am I going to have a job? Like, just sort of, I guess it's in the resilience phrase, it's where you fall down, isn't it? Because suddenly, especially for us as architects, like our industry can put, if we face a recession, we're going to have a pretty hard time for the building industry. I mean, it depends if you're maybe in an area where that's propped up by the government, but if you're not, like, it's going to be hard. So a lot of projects that I'm working on with another architect, a lot of them have gone on hold. So anyway, so I freaked out and he said, you know what, Nan, we just got to plant trees. We just got to take this opportunity to improve biodiversity, and we just got to get our hands dirty and plant trees. And I was like, at first I thought, oh, that seems, I'm not sure about that. We should just tackle the building industry. And then I thought, actually, that's a brilliant idea. Like, the whole reason we're sustainable design consultants is to like conserve biodiversity And so we should just cut to the chase and plant trees. So yeah, it's been pretty fun. Like during this lockdown period, we've been scheming about the best way to go about planting trees and just getting together, and I guess just getting a group and seeing what we can do. I think it's also about us getting a community together and people like you and me and anyone else who's interested in and getting together and doing something that feels positive and is actually making a bit of a change, a bit of a difference.
What type of trees are you going to plant, and where are you
Yeah,
going to
that's a
plant
good
them?
question. So yeah, we got together the Mullen Creek crew, so I'm just going to call it that, but there's a bunch of us, and then we also have a good friend who's a forest ecologist, so we got him on board, and
Yeah.
I guess we've just been discussing how best can we use our energy. So it's not just about planting trees, because if you just plant a tree, like it could be the wrong species in the wrong area, and it could just also not survive. So we have to be really strategic as to what we do. And there's one thing planting trees, but if they're not maintained and and fences aren't built to protect them and these sorts of things, then they're not going to survive. So it's also, I think, looking at more like a systems approach, that and realizing that, like we might not be planting trees, we may be weeding sometimes. It's not just all going to be sowing. Yeah, so we've been scheming up. We've been looking at different ideas, like whether you adopt a site, do we link in with some other organizations that are doing really good stuff, like some groups in land care or another group called BioLinks. Yeah, and do we grow a big a big volunteer base, or do we just keep it small? So these are the sorts of questions that we're asking. But I think to begin with, we're just going to identify some projects and go out every Saturday or Sunday and then just let it grow organically to some extent.
Yeah, that's amazing. So when you plant a tree, I've never planted a tree in my whole life. Do you get the tree like, yeah, is it like a tiny seed, or is it different for all trees? Or do you buy like kind of trees that are like already grown a little bit and then you plant them?
Yeah, you get like a tube stock. So it's it's like a seedling, but a tree seedling. Can be like 10 centimeters, maybe. Quite small still. Put in like three stakes around it, and then you put this maybe like a plastic sheet around it.
And is it a pretty similar process for different types of trees?
I think, yeah, it will depend on the species and everything, but yeah, like you might be planting larger trees or transplanting trees, but
Yeah. And would all the trees be indigenous trees that you'd be planting?
yeah. So what Steve, who's the forest ecologist, is saying, that we need to be really, we need to make sure that when we're planting in an area that you have stock that's genetic to that area, and that you find nurseries or tube stock, which is the seedlings that is correct, like that is right for that area.
That sounds so fascinating. I can't wait to hear like how it all develops. Apart from the fact that planting trees is obviously good for nature and it's good for biodiversity, what do you think the act of doing stuff like that brings to us, like as humans? Like going back to your idea of community, do you think it's important for people to do stuff like that? And maybe, like, I mean, yeah, me, I've never planted a tree ever. Do you think that like we're kind of drifting a little bit away from really natural organic stuff?
The act of like getting your hands dirty and putting your hands in the soil is really important.
Yeah, I feel sort of similar with the cats that I just got, because now that I have now that I have animals in my house, I feel like it forces me, like yesterday they actually had these injections, and so they were really tired, and I wanted to do all this stuff, but then they were just so cute and tired, like they just wanted to sit on my lap and like be hugged all
Oh,
day. And I was so cute, but it was really cute, but also I was like, I need to do stuff. But also I was thinking, if you have children, it's going to be like this. So you need to learn to slow
Yeah.
down. And then, and then I thought, yeah, like I kind of, and so I sat with them and I felt so calm just sitting with them, and they were like purring. And then I feel like maybe getting into nature could be like that too. I'm going to try and do some more natural stuff.
You're
But
so right. Yeah. And I think this COVID experience where we're currently in lockdown has like slowed us all down and made us like almost forced us to stop and reconnect with ourselves
yeah.
um and I don't know, are you finding that like you're really questioning your values and what you're doing with your life and
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I feel like more than ever before, like I think I probably do quite a lot of that stuff anyway, like because of the podcast and yoga, I like feel like I need to be quite fresh-minded when I talk to people. So I already sort of started that journey like a little while ago, but what COVID has changed for me is getting me to think more about kind of like what you were talking about with systems, and like it's given me space to think about how I'm living my life and why I'm doing certain things and if they're useful, and um, just becoming like, yeah, a bit stronger in my
yeah,
decisions. I really want to like make more of a commitment to making like more better choices, like always riding my bike if I can, always like having my keep cup if I can, like things that like in the past I've kind of gone through phases where I'm like, I'll do this and then I'll stop doing it because I just forgot. Now I feel like, well, like you should just do it and
yeah.
stick with it. Um, yeah, what do you think? Like, has it caused you to like think about um like your goals and
Yeah,
where you're going more, or like,
it's kind of so actually permaculture is actually it's actually a sort of a framework to deal with a system collapse. So it's very much like positioned itself as a sort of strategy for when we might reach peak oil or climate change emergencies. And so permaculture is actually
wow,
seen as like this system of thinking that can catch people once that curve is hit and you fall down on the other end, because it's all about self
wow,
resilience, about relying on community, moving away from a monetary economy, decentralization, riding your bike, keep cups, and everything that you're talking about. So it's kind of been this in
yeah,
the circles that I run in that are strong in permaculture. There's been a bit of an excitement going like this might be the chance for us to finally really live in this more in a more holistic way. So I hope that because everyone slows down, or because I slow down, that it will give me the opportunity to live actually like a bit more of a simpler life, like where you do have the time to ride your bike or sew some clothes and plant, and you're not just like going everywhere, just going and going and going and going, because I feel like this has forced us all to just stop. And yeah,
yeah,
we could probably also look at that in terms of architecture and the work we do, that doing it with more intention maybe. And because I get the feeling we're going to go through pretty like an economic downturn, so people won't have as much money to spend on buildings as they used to have, or developers or commercial clients. So we probably will in some ways be forced to do a lot more with a bit less. I hope so, because that works out well for resource depletion and the environment and carbon emissions as well. Yeah, and I think then I'd like to tie it back into what we started with about adaptability and resilience. Like right now, we have to really just question what are we doing, what is the way that we're working, and is there an alternative? Can we actually put our efforts and energy in other directions? Because we're better off thinking about that
yeah,
now rather than when it fully hits and we don't have the opportunity to explore other avenues. So I'm just thinking, like, even I heard an a big architecture practice that they're thinking about starting an ESD consultancy within in-house. So they're clearly using this time to come up with to innovate, right? So I think if it's easier said than done, but if we can think of ways that we could, maybe thrive or in the new world, that would be good. And that's what I'm trying to. I've started my own practice, and I'm thinking I really would love to help low income earners. I'd love to help people access architecture design services who don't have the budget or the money to do so. So I don't know how I can do that. Maybe that's when natural building comes in, because natural building can potentially be a bit more low cost, and it can be where I own a builder. But yeah, I guess these are questions that I'm thinking of, and we've had these conversations about how can we help people in need, not just people with big wallets. When I was overseas, especially in India, you don't even you can just do early designs, and then you don't need to produce construction documentation, because you can go to site and say, just move that window there, move that there. You're more involved with the building. And imagine it, because you go to site, you realize the better view is 10 centimeters to the left. So you just tell the construction worker, just move it. Whereas we come up with these designs, we put them on paper, and then they have to build exactly that way, because our hands are tied in so many different ways to make those changes. So how can we how can the architecture process be a bit more fluid potentially? I don't know.
Yeah, I love that you've started this journey. So the name of your company is Natural Elements Design.
Well, I guess I started it maybe pretty much the same time coronavirus hit. So
prime time to open a business.
It's not going anywhere fast. Yeah. But I think the end game, and I'm thinking over 30 years, it's this is my long game, but I would love to somehow bring everything that I love about natural building, or bring elements into conventional practice, because I absolutely love architecture. I do really like it as a profession, and I love designing spaces, but I would love if it was a bit more collaborative, human-centered, and a bit more connected with nature. So I guess that's the end goal, but I think it being a startup, the next couple of years will just be about gaining experience and learning to run a business.
With Doyen, every new business, every new thing, it's no one has done that before. No one will do it in that same way. And it can be I found it quite challenging sometimes, because I'm having conversations with people and it's really hard to explain the whole issue that I'm facing, in one particular element of trying to organize something, or trying to book something in, or maybe I've had a reaction to a conversation that's upset me and I don't quite know why. It's really hard when you're doing it. But that's just not a bad thing. It's just, I think, the reality of starting something new, and you'll grow so much with it, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think that we have to remember, it's if you're going for what you're passionate in, and if you're really trying to pursue that, it's not always going to be easy, and that's kind of where the getting back up and keep on going. So I feel my big lesson is just to be persistent or determined, and not let all these setbacks just I just have to make sure I don't give up. That's pretty much
You start a new business or a new thing, and then I've been reading a lot of quotes recently that say an overnight success, they're actually 10 years in the making. And it's so true about architecture. You're I've started Natural Elements, and it's sort of wow, it's just a new thing, and it is new, it's a new brand, it's a new identity, and that's exciting. But with that comes 10 plus years of university, working, like all these little things, and like that's our value. So yeah, I find that really, like, I'm so excited. I can't wait to see what happens. Well, thank you so much, Nay, for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks, Nay.
It's been such a great experience.
Thanks, Nayan, for the chat. I hope you can join us in our next episode when we talk to Fiona Young and Natalia Krysiak about some educational projects that they've been working on in Sydney.
I guess she just opened up this whole new world for me of the world of research, and became kind of a really strong role model for me on how to approach building design through a research lens. And I think above anything else, what Fiona constantly brings to her practice as an architect is challenging stereotypes of how space should and could be used, and really deeply understanding how behaviours relate to spatial design. And I think that's something that you can only learn through someone that's doing a PhD who's so immersed in a topic and thinking about behaviour and how it relates to space in this really kind of deep way.